John, welcome back.
This is Roadmap to Retirement. Tune in for financial tips, investment strategies, and smart money moves to supercharge your retirement savings. Alex Neri, CFP, and guests are here to help you build your roadmap to retirement.
We are here today to talk about a kind of a different type of topic. Well, we've been getting a lot of questions from young financial advisors, or at least new financial advisors, that are trying to navigate the industry and figure out where to start, where to go, and all that kind of stuff. So I thought we would take a step back, and you're a good guy for this. So let's talk industry for a little bit.
Okay.
And then we'll bring this back to how it's applicable to maybe other businesses too, just to appeal to all of our listeners, hopefully, and help them out.
Sure.
So tell me a little bit about your entrance into being a financial advisor, and eventually we'll circle back to some things you might do differently.
Yeah. So I graduated from Nazareth University with a degree in international studies and philosophy.
Of course.
Which of course qualified me to do almost nothing in particular. I was really good at like reasoning and things like that, but there was no set career path for me. And I knew I wanted to work in an office. I didn't really know how to define that. Eventually, I landed in financial services after just applying everywhere. I landed at a local firm, a mid-sized firm here in Rochester, and they let me sit in a chair while I did some HTML coding and some researching for this web-based platform that they had about kind of life events and financial planning during those life events. And that's where I studied for my 7, my 66, and my New York State life accident health insurance license. And they paid for all of that, which was great. Then I moved to become an assistant for a team of financial advisors about 1.5 years after I joined the industry. I spent 7 years there. It was a large wirehouse. Owe that team a lot of who I am as a financial planner. While I was there, I studied for my master's in personal financial planning. I studied for my CFP and sat for that, passed that, my CFP exam, and became a junior planner there eventually. But then eventually I went to become a full planner at another firm. And then a little bit after that, I joined my current firm again as a full-fledged financial planner. Now I have my own clients, my own book of business, and I run planning for the whole firm.
Cool.
Yeah.
So you never thought you'd be here. What?
I didn't. No, I didn't.
But you're here. That's just great.
Yeah.
So I'm always curious. I think it's one of the tough things with, I don't know, society, if that's not too broad, is that they force you to try to figure out what you want to do with your life when you're 17 or 18 years old. And you pick a major based on that.
Yeah.
And then everything's in motion, and those decisions that you made at 17 or 18 affect where you are today as you get into your 30s, 40s, and beyond. So going into college, if we can go back to that, what did you think you wanted to do when you picked your major?
Yeah, this is a great question. I don't know if I've ever told you this before. I might have, but so I was going to study aeronautical engineering. So I had gone to Clarkson University up in wherever it is. And I started studying physics, chemistry, calculus to become an aeronautical engineer, design airplanes and boats and cars and things like that. Yeah, I had no idea that I was going to end up here.
Okay, how wrong you were.
I was incredibly wrong.
Yeah, me too. So I originally went to college to be a physical therapist. And
what?
I don't know if I've ever had this conversation.
I don't think so.
New conversation. All right, perfect. Yeah, so I thought I wanted to be a physical therapist. I went to Mercyhurst for that originally. And I don't know what got in my mind that made me think I wanted to do that, other than I was an 18-year-old guy that liked to work out. And I figured physical therapy had something, like, there were just like these connections of logic that I don't think are really totally true, but in my stupid 18-year-old mind said, sure, why not?
Yeah.
And then I got to anatomy class my sophomore year in the fall, and that was the turning point, right? I got to anatomy. I was like, not only do I find this boring, but I genuinely do not care about the human body. I don't need to know. So anyway, that steered me away from that. And I figured if I don't care about the human body, pursuing a career in any kind of medical type thing, probably isn't like the right path, right? You don't want a physical therapist that says, hey, I don't care about the human body. So I took a step back from there, and I was like, okay, what am I good at? And I had a conversation with a counselor or a guidance counselor that ended up being pretty helpful. And I was always a pretty good math student. So I liked the idea of working in some kind of business capacity. So I started taking classes in accounting and finance, eventually gravitating towards finance. And I graduated with a degree in finance. So when I tell my story of how I got in this business, like it seems on the surface like, okay, you went to college for finance and became a financial planner. Like that sort of makes sense. But initially going into my higher education experience, I had no idea what I wanted to do. And I think I stumbled onto this career for a couple different reasons. I did internships and that kind of thing. And all of a sudden I woke up one day and I'm 12 years in my career. And I guess I made the right decision. I don't know. But I like what I do and I get to do it every day. And I like my clients and there's a lot to like about it, but I definitely didn't set out to become this. And I think, to go back to our original point, I think that's what a lot of young advisors are going through. They're probably in a role or in a career that if they're 22 and they just graduated college, they didn't think they'd be doing this 5 years ago. So it's trying to figure out where to go. And unfortunately, we're in a world where there's not a lot of guidance for the 22-year-old who wants to be a financial advisor. Yeah. I will argue until I'm blue in the face, there's not a good place to start. But I'm curious about your thoughts. What's the best place to start?
Yeah. I spent some time thinking about this ahead of our conversation. And I think that one of the best places to start is just by immersing yourself in the vocabulary of the industry, like understanding what you're looking for in terms of a career, right? So surprisingly, there are quite a few different options for what you can do, even within personal finance, right? You can work in insurance, you can be an accountant, you can be a financial advisor, you can be specifically a planner, you can be an analyst. And figuring out what actually excites you about any of those is, I think, an important first step. And a lot of that has to do with just trying to research what's available and learn more about what each of those roles does.
I think that's important. So one of the things that's always tough from our perspective is like the term financial advisor is so broad.
Yeah.
And if you ask 22-year-old Alex Neary what he wants to do, and I said financial advisor, I think you have to dig deeper and say, like, okay, what do you think that means? And when you're interviewing somewhere, you're talking to a firm, like really getting crystal clear on like what the role is.
Yeah.
Are you selling insurance? Are you doing true planning? Do you want to do more of a portfolio management where you're picking stocks and bonds? What do you think is the right path? And then to your point, understand the vocabulary around it and guide you towards what you want to do, even though you probably don't really know what you want to do.
Yeah. And I think that that's an interesting point too, is you don't know what you want to do. So at least figuring out some of the things that you do want to do will start to get you in the right direction, right? Because you can interview, interestingly enough, you can interview for 5 to 10 different financial advisory firms just in Rochester alone. And every single one of them will have a different approach. They might do financial planning. They might not do financial planning. They might say that they do financial planning and do it differently than you or I do, which is
called financial planning, but then you get paid a commission for selling a product.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So there's so much out there that you have to, and it's really it's incumbent upon the person who's interviewing to know what they're starting to get themselves into. But also, if they end up finding themselves in the wrong situation, it's not the end of the world. Because I've even been in situations where I was like, I don't know if I'm going to be gaining any value from this. But even in that circumstance, the value that you can walk away with is, I don't want to do this. Or like, this piece of what I'm doing now is good, but the rest of it is not what I want.
Sure. Yeah, I think you can argue there's no such thing as bad experience because you're learning. And when you're in your early 20s, the reality is you're not going to, I think it's dangerous with the amount of information that's available online right now. Even when I started my career, we had the internet. Like there wasn't as much information, or maybe I was ignorant to it. So if a 22-year-old says, I want to be an independent financial advisor, I want to focus on financial planning, I want to be in a certain fee model, they might have the right idea that those are things they want, but realistically, they're just not going to have the opportunity to do that out of the gate.
Right.
Unless they've got their dad or uncle or somebody's a financial advisor and they're going to take them under the wing. The independent financial firms are not hiring somebody to do that.
Right.
So you probably have to, and we can talk about the difference in our experiences, but you came up in a world where you were learning planning as an assistant in that capacity. When I came up in a world where I was throwing the fire right away to hired by an insurance company to do financial planning, but also that wasn't really, there's some smoke and mirrors with that world too.
Yeah.
And I think for me at 22, I think it would have been very hard to tell me to take a step back, to put my ego in check, to take a step back from doing what I thought was financial planning to actually learn the right way, which I think is an opportunity that you had.
Yeah.
And I'm very fortunate. I had some great mentors. I had people point me in the right direction that I think without those people influencing me, I don't think I'd be where I am today.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say to a lot of people, maybe doing it the way you did it is better because you can actually learn what real financial planning is before you have to go out there and live in the eat what you kill world.
Yeah. I think that there's something there. I think there's value to what you experienced, but I think that the way that I came up was great, but it could have not been great because I came up in a team that was interested in my success, that was interested in cultivating me to be a permanent part of their team.
Mm-hmm.
They believed not only in financial planning, but in me learning how to do that financial planning. You can very easily end up on teams where the financial planning is not a focus, right? And then you are an assistant. If you're motivated to become an advisor or a planner in some capacity, you might be stuck on that team. So identifying when it's time for you to maybe choose away from where you are is crucial when you are coming up as an assistant, because not all teams are interested in you becoming more than an assistant. And I even ran into that sometimes too. As dedicated as my team was to me becoming a planner, I don't want to pat myself on the back, but I was almost too good at my job to the point where
I believe that. Makes a lot of sense.
Thank you, Alex. Thank you. To the point where it would set the team back for me to move on without having a firm replacement for me. And finding a replacement for me was challenging.
It's impossible. Absolutely.
Man.
I think you hit on something important, and we're talking about different ways that a firm can be structured. And I think you can have this back and forth debate about what's the best place to start. But the thing that you brought up is that if you didn't have that team there and the individuals in the room that cared about your success and were willing to invest in you and allow you to grow as a professional, you wouldn't be where you are today. And I'm saying the same thing, that although I was in, the word toxic is used too much, but a poor culture and poor educational spot for a lot of reasons, I did have certain people within that firm that were great mentors, took an interest in me and taught me to do things what I would say is the right way.
Yeah.
So maybe the message for a young person who wants to get into this business is to focus less on, is it an insurance broker dealer? Is it a wirehouse? Is it a bank? Whatever it is, and focus more on, is the person sitting across the table from you in an interview somebody that is going to be a good mentor to you?
Yeah.
And put the time and invest into you. And also, do they know what they're doing? And that's really hard to distinguish when you're, again, starting off in the career and you don't know a lot.
Yeah.
How do you sit there and judge the person that's interviewing you on whether or not they even know how to run a business or how to do financial planning?
Agreed. Which is why that vocabulary is really important too. Exposing yourself to industry experts. I'm a big Michael Kitce's fan, and I listen to the Financial Advisor Success podcasts all the time. I've probably listened to a couple hundred of them at this point, and and even that is a perfect way to understand what's possible, what's out there, so that the more that it's like a foreign language, right? The more you immerse yourself in the language of financial planning, the more you know what questions to ask to identify if the team that you're interviewing with or the person that you're sitting across from could be a good mentor. Because I think that most of us in this industry have been, I don't want to say hoodwinked, but we've been sold a bill of goods that didn't necessarily pan out the way that, and we all have. You could have 100 different planners in here and we'd all have stories like that. So but yeah, just knowing what you need to know is a huge step.
Sure.
Yeah.
It's tough. Yeah. It's so hard to know what you need to know. And there are unfortunately bad players in our industry, and short of calling them out publicly, what do you do about it? You have to hopefully educate these people enough to make good decisions.
Yeah.
So on that similar topic, let's say that you didn't know all this, you're listening to this episode and learning a lot from John and Alex here, and you're saying, oh no, I'm at one of these firms that maybe I don't want to be at. My mentor is lacking in a lot of things, and I'm starting to recognize that. I think a easy mistake is to jump ship too quickly
Sure.
to say, I don't like where I'm at. I'm not going to do this. I'm going to go somewhere else. You're always looking for that perfect firm or perfect place to be, which may not exist.
Yep.
So what advice would you give to somebody that say they're a year and a half into their career?
Mm-hmm.
They are recognizing that the firm they're at is not ideal.
Mm-hmm.
They don't have the mentorship in place that they would need.
Mm-hmm.
Where should they go from here? Do they look for another opportunity? Do they suck it up?
Yeah, there are two things I'd recommend. First is join the local FPA chapter, the local Financial Planning Association chapter. Generally speaking, it's filled with people who are at least showing up to the meetings and want to improve their understanding of financial planning, even if they're not full-fledged financial planners. So they at least have an interest in financial planning, and have conversations with them to see if your experience is unusual or if it's typical of a particular set of individuals or particular types of firms that you might be interested in looking at. There's a lot to be gained from just knowing a lot of people in the industry, having conversations. And then the other thing that I would say is just reach out, right? We've been having a lot of people reach out to us recently, I think separately even, to just have conversations with us about what their future, what they want to do. And I'm always happy to have those I'll take a half an hour, 45-minute Zoom call with someone just to help put them on the right direction, or if they have a particular question about what they're currently doing, see if we've had similar experiences and how we navigated them.
Yeah, it's definitely picked up recently with some of the stuff we're doing on LinkedIn, but I've had a ton of conversations with anyone from a college student that thinks they want to be a financial advisor to people that have been in their career for 4 or 5 years and they're starting to become aware of different opportunities. For myself, like I mentioned earlier, I'm very fortunate to be where I am, and a lot of it's because I had good mentorship and there are people that are willing to take the call when I had questions. So
right.
I am more than happy to pay that forward and have conversations with young people, new advisors, whoever it is. And yeah, it's hopping on Zoom for 15, 20 minutes, answering their questions, and hopefully it points in the right direction. If anyone's listening to this and they're having questions, you can reach out to me, but reach out to anybody. You'll find any advisor that's been around and been through what you're going through is more than happy to take a few minutes out of their schedule to do that.
Yeah.
You will not hear anyone say, no, I'm not talking to you. It's just not how our industry
Unless
is.
they're too busy. But they might not respond.
They might not respond.
Right. That happens sometimes, but don't be discouraged by that.
If they are not responding, it's not because they are annoyed at you. It's because they maybe have other things to do, which is fine.
Which is a good problem to have.
That's a good problem to have. Yeah, we understand that.
Yeah, absolutely.
What did we cover so far? So we talked. I think we did pretty good so far. So we talked about getting into the business, jumping out points. Anything you would do differently if you were to build a time machine?
Yeah, I think about this a lot. So I probably wouldn't have spent so much time. I probably wouldn't have spent all of the 7 years at that wirehouse with that team. I learned a lot while I was there. I think that I reached my learning capacity at a certain point because of the structure of a wirehouse. Not that wirehouses are bad, but I think that I've learned a significant amount more since I've left. Not necessarily about planning, because I've been on my own as a planner, but about the industry as a whole. So I went from basically a mutual fund company to a wirehouse to an independent shop to an RIA. And so I've been at most of the channels of financial advice. And I think that I feel so much more at home in the independent / RIA space. So I would have encouraged a younger version of me to maybe consider leaving that job sooner. And of course, there were a lot of dynamics there that kept me there. But I think, and again, very incredibly grateful to that team that had me there, and I'm still close with them and appreciate them immensely. But I think that I sometimes feel like I'm behind some of my peers in the industry, and I think that maybe that might be why, because maybe I stayed too long.
Okay. Yeah. It's tough to get into that comparison, but
Yeah.
I think that's true in almost any business. This is how we relate this back to people that are not a financial advisor that have stayed with us through the first 20 minutes of this episode for whatever reason. But I think you loop it back, like any business you're in, there's a tremendous cost to waiting.
Yeah.
Not to be too cliche about it, but like you do have a finite amount of years on this planet.
Mm-hmm.
And if you wait to make that jump to another 10 years, like you're putting yourself 10 years behind. And
Yes.
I think for a lot of people, you bet on yourself and that John is a good financial planner. He's going to make it in this business. So like, why wait to be successful in that? And I know there's a real world, you have to pay your bills and all that,
Mhm.
but I think too many business owners, too many business-minded people wait to make the plunge.
Yeah. And I would say take chances early
Mhm.
too. That's something that I would change as well.
Yeah.
Because the perfect situation rarely rolls along. So you're going to have to take chances. It's a lot harder to take chances later in your career, I think, than it is earlier in your career, because generally you're established, you have
Yeah.
bills and a family and things
When
like
you're
that.
22 years old, it's socially acceptable to live at your parents' house or have 5 roommates. Like you can do things that cut costs once you get into I'm not going to put an age on it, but to a certain age, you don't want to have a roommate anymore. And
Sure.
It's not cool to live at your parents' house when you're 40. So let's try to avoid that. So,
Yeah.
I would encourage our young listeners to take the risk while they are young and not tied down and do that.
I agree. I agree completely.
All right. I think we revolutionized the world of financial advising today.
As always.
That always happens. So thank you for being here. Appreciate it.
Thank you for the
And
invite.
I'm sure we'll do this again soon.
Absolutely.
Content here is for illustrative purposes and general information only. It is not legal, tax, or individualized financial advice, nor is it a recommendation to buy, sell, or hold any specific security or engage in any specific trading strategy. Results will vary. Past performance is no indication of future results or success. Market conditions change continuously. This commentary reflects the personal opinions, viewpoints, and analyses of Alexander Neri. It does not necessarily represent those of RFG Advisory, their clients, or their employees. This commentary should not be regarded as a description of advisory services provided by Alexander Neri or RFG Advisory, or performance returns of any client. The views reflected in the commentary are subject to change at any time without notice. Advisory services offered by investment advisory representatives of RFG Advisory, a registered investment advisor. Alexander Neri and RFG Advisory are unaffiliated entities. Advisory services are only offered to clients or prospective clients where RFG Advisory and its representatives are properly licensed or exempt from licensure. No advisory services may be rendered by RFG Advisory unless a client agreement is in place.